And this business that we have to pay to get them to talk about trade is just completely ridiculous, because they need to talk about trade more than we need to talk about trade. We all know they will talk about trade before March 2019 because it's in their interest to do so, and we have absolutely no need to pay them a penny to get them to talk about something they need to talk about.
If there is a deal where we stay on, would they call it an implementation period or a transitional period, John Redwood, of maybe a year or 2 years, then maybe the contributions we would make would increase from we'd have to pay, presumably, to stay in the single market if that's part of the transitional deal. But even if that's the case, should ministers or anybody be talking about figures this early in the negotiations?
No, and I don't think ministers are, and ministers would be quite wrong to be talking about any figures. We don't owe them any money, and it would be silly to be offering something when the EU is still not very willing to talk and is not coming up with anything very constructive on its own side. The EU's tactic is very clear. It's divide and rule. It's to try and get Britain negotiating with herself, and once again they've been very successful, because the Telegraph story is in that category of stories we've seen for months now, where various people in Britain who clearly don't have Britain's interests at heart brief newspapers to say that we must make compromises and sacrifices before the other side are willing to talk sensibly about these things, and then does it in open and in public. And that is a good way to undermine the British position.
The Telegraph, you've read it. I'm just so LBC listeners know what the Telegraph says. It says the Sunday Telegraph understands government negotiators have ascertained the EU's actual opening position is around 60 billion, not 100 billion, which was the most extreme interpretation of the EU demands. Well, we know that the 100 billion was a figure plucked out of thin air by the Financial Times, of course. Now the Telegraph is saying that 60 billion is what they're seeking. Therefore, 36 billion is a good deal. Are you convinced by that?
No, of course not. I just explained to you why I think there is absolutely no legal need or political need to offer them anything at all, full stop. But if people who want to make a compromise know anything about negotiating, you certainly wouldn't offer a compromise at the moment, because there's no sign of any common sense coming out of the EU on the matters that they need to sort out. I mean, they desperately need a trade deal with us. They desperately want reassurances about our continued commitment to defence and intelligence and all the other things that we wish to do. The UK is making an enormously generous offer to the EU. It is saying that they can have untrammeled, tariff-free, relatively barrier-free access to our markets in perpetuity when they have a massive surplus with us. We're offering them all sorts of free advice and support and service on defence, intelligence, foreign policy, all sorts of areas that they think we have a contribution to make. And all we're asking is a friendly response.
This doesn't feel like a friendly response to you, if indeed you don't accept the figure. Anyway, what of Tory MPs, John Redwood, if ministers eventually do say, well, actually, that idea, no deal is better than bad deal, we're not going to do that, we will pay something, would it get through the Commons?
I think Conservative MPs, by a majority, would be extremely angry if we threw away a very strong position we're in and started offering them money when we have absolutely no need to, and suggesting at this stage we might be paying them 36 billion when there's no legal basis would cause all sorts of legal difficulties, because remember, the government would need to get express legal permission to pay any of these sums of money, because there is no legal base for the government paying anything above our normal EU contributions. And so I think they would need a specific piece of legislation to offer all this money to rich Europe at a time when we'd quite like to spend it.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.